So we'll start with introductions and welcome from the rest of the team. I'm going to provide an overview of what's being proposed at this time. And then our consultant, who I'll introduce in just a second, will be giving an overview of the environmental impact report process, what we're preliminarily scoping for the EIR, and then we'll have the public input portion at the end. So the EIR project team. So the City of Santa Clara is what CEQA refers to as the lead agency. So we are the owners of the document. Alongside us, we have one major consultant for the EIR, and then a multitude of sub-consultants, including Hexagon, who is our transportation consultant. So the EIR consultant is ICF. We have Jennifer Anderson here this evening. She's with ICF and she's doing a majority of the work on that end. So she'll give us some background on the EIR process in a little bit. So the meeting purpose. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to just provide information on the EIR process, give you an overview of the project if you're not familiar yet, and then to get input on the scope of the EIR. So that's what you, as experts on Santa Clara, experts on the neighborhood, topics you think should be analyzed in the EIR, as well as alternatives to be analyzed in the EIR. So alternatives to what's being proposed. So to be clear, tonight is not a project meeting. So we're not taking comments per se on the project itself. So if you have comments on the height or the density or something like that, we're more looking at comments for the scope of the EIR. So for the subject matter, like how we should study air quality or traffic, intersections that you think might be impacted, things like that. So here is an aerial showing the project location if you're not familiar. So it's a 48.6 acre site in North Santa Clara. It's outlined there in blue, so it's on the south side of Tasman Drive. And then it has the SFPUC, the quote unquote Hetchy right of way on the south side of the property. And it's very close to the Sunnyvale border, which is just across, use my arrow, just across to the Calabasas Creek here. So currently there are 4 vacant light industrial buildings on the northern portion of the site. And then down here is completely vacant at this time. So you may have heard about the Kylie project a couple of years ago. So there was a prior submittal, and we previously had a scoping meeting for that submittal. But to be clear, this is a new submittal, a completely new project description, new mix of uses. And that's why per CEQA, we are required to do another scoping meeting and kind of restart the EIR process. So here is a kind of overall project description of what, of course, there's a lot more nuance than this, but as far as the land uses that are proposed, 3 million square feet of office, 100,000 square feet of retail, up to 1,800 new multifamily residential units, a childcare facility, and then indoor and outdoor community and park spaces. So you can see here the residential is identified in yellow, office in blue, and then those community spaces are in pink, and then obviously the green spaces is parkland or open spaces connecting down here to a new multi-use trail directly adjacent to that SFPUC right-of-way. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. She's going to give us kind of an overview of the purpose of an EIR and what the document is serving to provide.
Sure. Thanks, Rebecca. So as mentioned earlier, we are preparing an EIR for the Mission Point project, and I'll briefly give an overview of the process and the preliminary scope of the EIR. So an EIR is an informational document designed to inform the public and decision makers about potential environmental impacts of a project. It allows us to evaluate ways to avoid or reduce impacts of a project using mitigation measures or alternatives to a project. SECRA requires lead agencies to impose feasible mitigation measures as part of the approval of a project in order to substantially lessen or avoid the significant adverse effects of a project. Mitigation measures are defined as avoiding the impact altogether, minimizing the impact by limiting its degree or magnitude, rectifying the impact by repairing, rehabilitating, or restoring the impacted environmental resource, reducing or eliminating the impact over time through actions that preserve or maintain the resource, and compensating for the impact by replacing or providing substitute resources or environmental conditions. Alternatives to the proposed project are ways that the project sponsor could achieve most of their basic project objectives while also reducing or eliminating the environmental impacts of the proposed projects. Environmental impacts are just one of the ways that decision makers, or one of the factors that decision makers consider when deciding whether or not to approve a project. Next slide. So this slide, it shows an overview of the EIR process. The Mission Point project is currently in the first step, distribute notice of preparation, and we're soliciting public input on the content of the draft EIR. After this step, we'll start preparing the draft EIR. Once the draft EIR is prepared, we'll file the notice of completion and post the notice of availability of the draft EIR. And that starts the 45-day public review period for the draft EIR. And then that's when we'll solicit comments on the adequacy of the draft EIR. After public review of the draft EIR, we'll prepare the final EIR, which will include a response to each comment received on the draft EIR. Last, the lead agency would certify the EIR and file the notice of determination. And so we are right at the start of the process for this project. Next slide.
Yeah, and just one thing to add, the last step, lead agency certifies the EIR, that's an approval by the city council. So they're the approving body in this instance.
The EIR for the Mission Point project is going to be a project level document that analyzes the environmental effects of the project. The EIR will focus on issues present in the project area that could be potentially impacted, including all of the different resources that are listed in the slides. So aesthetics, air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, energy, geology and soils, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards, hydrology and water quality, land use, noise, population and housing, public services, recreation, transportation, tribal cultural resources, and utilities and service systems.
So submitting comments. So we are kind of in the middle of our 30-day comment period. So comments will be accepted through May 18th. You can submit them to me via email and also submit them via letter. And then obviously at tonight's meeting, we'll be taking verbal and written comments, and we'll be taking notes on any comments we receive. And I failed to mention that we do have a representation from the Kylie Mission Point team. So if there are specific questions Jennifer or I are unable to answer, we can tag them in and they can help us out. So if you have a question, if you could raise your hand and I will unmute you. I thought I saw someone. Sorry, not if you have a question. Well, if you have a question, you can raise your hand, but also if you have a comment or anything to add. Oh, I think we have a question. Are you seeing that, Jennifer? Can you see that? So we got What is the impact on the creek and on the homes in Adobe Wells? The community area seems minimal, wondering about traffic on Tasman. So I don't see Michelle on, but obviously we'll be studying traffic intensely.
Yeah, I think we will be looking at impacts on creeks and on the different areas around the project site.
And I think I will double check or if this commenter can add on. I believe Adobe Wells is the mobile home park in Sunnyvale, just across the creek. So our study does take into account impacts to other cities. So Sunnyvale in this case. Lalo, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, good evening, Rebecca. Just making sure that this is the time for us to provide comments, right? It's because I haven't heard anybody else jump in.
Correct, yes. So I'm not seeing any other raised hands. I know you can't see it on your end as a webinar attendee, but you're the only person with a raised hand.
Perfect, just making sure. Thank you very much. For those folks who might be listening, my name is Lalo Vindis and I work with Catalyze SB. We are based in the Silicon Valley, so we have a regional approach, and we work directly with folks like the applicant. We work with public officials and also community members. For those members who are perhaps in the audience and who have questions in regards to the environmental impact report or any additional feedback. So, if anyone in the audience is interested in becoming a member, please check out our website and see how we've scored projects. And if you want to provide some additional feedback on in the future, and different from the environmental impact report, we invite you to join us and see how we score the projects. In regards to the project presented today, we're very excited about seeing this kinds of projects, mixed use, that provides both homes and also office spaces. And we've been talking to this applicant for a while, and our members are really excited and looking forward to continue to engage this conversation and provide additional feedback, as it looks very promising.
Thank you, Lalo. Yes, as he said, this is the portion for questions or comments. I can see another. So we have another question. Maybe this is for Wendy, and then I'll. How many stories will the buildings be directly behind Adobe Wells Mobile Home Park? So there is a, okay, let's go back to the aerial view. So there is a buffer. So you'll see, I believe this is the mobile home park. These buildings are not part of the project scope. So the closest building in this project would be along here. And then for the height, I think I had, yeah. So the height on that side looks like the highest is 210 proposed down here on the southwest corner. Yeah.
That looks right to me. It might be worth noting that also if anyone is interested, an application has been submitted, which has a lot more details in it. And that can be found on the city's website. I'm not sure, Rebecca, if you can post that in the chat for people to get, but that way folks can get a lot more information about the specifics of the proposal.
Jennifer, there's a comment, traffic on Tasman, especially during games. So I believe they're referring to like football games at this nearby stadium.
Yeah, we'll be looking at traffic on Tasman. I don't think Hexagon could join.
Hexagon is our traffic consultant, to clarify.
But we will be looking at that in the transportation technical report.
Yeah, so to kind of expand on that, there is an entire separate technical report prepared by traffic engineers called a traffic impact analysis, and that kind of feeds into the EIR. So they study intersections, vehicle miles traveled, etc.
And we're right at the start of that process, starting the technical report. So we don't have the answer right now, but we will.
So Wendy, or member of the Kylie team, the next question is, I remember the FAA stated the building height was too high. What has been done to address the FAA concern?
Sure. So there was a process. This is why actually some of you may be familiar with the fact that this was submitted, several years ago. We received feedback from the FAA that the project, they felt the heights of the project were concerning. And so what we've done over the course of the last couple of years is actually work directly with the FAA to establish height limits on this property. And that's why you can see there's a variety of heights that are shown on the image that's on your screen. And most of those, are reflective of it and were responsive to the FAA feedback that we received when we supplied our own application to the FAA to better understand the height limits on this site. So we've received that feedback. As we move forward, we will again go through their process with all of these refinements, and then the FAA will again weigh in. So the FAA will weigh in on the environmental review process as well as the application itself, and we'll have a separate approval process through FAA. But right now, what's shown has been, the preliminary heights that the FAA has deemed acceptable for the site, or lower.
Thank you, Wendy. The next question, is there a timeline? Jennifer, I think the last timeline you sent showed a late 2023, correct?
Yes, targeting release of the draft EIR in summer 2023.
So summer 2023, that's when the actual document would be available for review and comment. And then, as Jennifer described earlier, we go through the process of responding to all the comments we receive, and then certification, hopefully in late 2023, which, as I said, is a city council approval. Affordable housing. I think with the new, I believe this you're referring to the related project, with the new related project just a few blocks away, it seems we need housing more than retail. So this project is subject to the city's affordable housing requirements. So we do have an ordinance related to that. So they are responsible for providing affordable housing within the project. What is the height of the tallest building? Do you know that offhand, Wendy?
I'm looking, and it appears to be 210 feet.
Yeah, so that's what I saw as well. 210 down here on the southwest corner.
As you can see, there's a variety of heights, with some tower elements, some more podium elements, shorter structures. So the intent here is to get a lot of variety and articulation, but the maximum height is reflected as 210 feet. And again, those were established working with the FAA sort of hand in hand to find out what was acceptable height limits. And, we're also looking at the adjacencies at the Patrick Henry specific plan to sort of make sure that there's continuity between this entire region as a whole and in Santa Clara North. So heights are sort of reflective of some of the other heights you might see directly adjacent in the Patrick Henry specific plan.
Follow-up is how many stories is that? So 210 feet, you'll probably get between like about 18 stories.
So those in that area that is residential, and so residential stories are a little bit different than commercial stories. Commercial stories are a little bit taller, floor plate to floor plate. So 210 foot residential building with something on the ground floor might be about 18 to 20 stories.
Yeah, I think the NOP says up to 21 stories.
Can you please repeat the parking count and ratio for both residential and office? I don't have that handy. Do either of you?
I don't either. I could.
There are up to about 9,400 stalls proposed. I don't have that exact ratio.
So 9,400 stalls proposed, and that is in a mix of podium parking, and they're also proposing underground parking as well.
That is correct.
The next question is, do EIRs measure the benefits of sustainable development, i.e. green building and different forms of mobility besides single-use automobiles? Can this EIR measure that?
So yeah, the analysis will definitely take that into account. Particularly greenhouse gas analysis and energy will take into account sustainable development like green building code and stuff like that. And then different forms of mobility besides single-use automobiles, the transportation analysis will consider that. And there's also going to be it's called the TDM plan, a transportation demand management plan. That will, I don't know, maybe Wendy could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. The application will include, as it progresses, a transportation demand management plan, which includes specific measures that are intended to either, decrease vehicle miles traveled, or decrease project vehicular trips. So the TDM measures will include things. You can include things like car sharing, or it can include things like different ways of getting folks onto transportation, again, things like carpooling, et cetera. So there's lots of obviously things that can happen as far as design, which is a mixed use design obviously helps with keeping more trips right on site. And then there's things that can be done as far as specific measures to decrease single occupancy vehicles. That's your single driver that's on the road, and that will all be studied. And obviously we will be taking into consideration all of the current city standards when working towards transportation demand management goals for the project.
Thank you, Wendy. So the next question is about affordable housing, which I hope I can answer. Is affordable housing meant for people making less than $80,000 so that possibly a service worker could live there? So the way our affordable housing ordinance is written, it requires housing at different levels of affordability, so low, very low, etc. So there's different levels of affordability required within a project, especially of this size or at 1,800 units. Wendy, I don't know if you know this offhand, or I know the Kylie team is on. Are the 49ers still going to use the property for parking next football season? I don't know.
I think that, well, we know that this is a long entitlement process, right? And then a long environmental review process. So next season, certainly this project has a ways to go as far as entitlement process. And then after that, we would be submitting for building permits and so forth, and going in phases. So there will be some time until a reconfiguration or reconsideration of the parking on the site will be necessary. So I think the easy answer, the quick answer is yes, next football season, this will still be utilized for football parking, assuming that the 49ers continue to lease the parking on the property.
Are open spaces available to the public or only to those living in the housing? So the project would have a mix of publicly accessible or private open spaces. So private open spaces are typical in residential developments. But for example, all of these green spaces here, the South Park, the Central Green, all the way up to this Gateway Plaza would be open to the public. If you'd like to ask a question verbally, you can also raise your hand and I can unmute you as well. Okay, not seeing any other questions. Jennifer, is there anything you wanted to add? Let me go back to my.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. One more question just came in. Is there a way to go higher than 210 feet? From your answer, Wendy, it seems like no, that 210 was kind of the maximum that the FAA provided.
That's right. We're right around the maximum heights that have been permitted by the FAA. And again, there was a variety of heights depending on the flight pattern, et cetera, radar, all these things, building separation that can be permitted on the site. And so it's going to be very, very specific to what the FAA's maximums are. And again, we'll have to resubmit. Could it be 211 feet? Quite possibly. Could it be 300 feet? I don't believe so. We're probably pretty close in that maximum building height to the maximum that FAA would allow.
Does Santa Clara have firefighting equipment for buildings of this height? So from my understanding, the fire department is starting to get this type of equipment because we are seeing taller buildings in the city, particularly right now, office buildings. But I'm sure you've all seen recently, there's taller residential buildings coming through. And so part of the EIR does study public services. So that includes the fire department, making sure they have the staffing and equipment to adequately protect this project should it be approved. So I just wanted to say one more time, the public comment period is through May 18th. Those can be submitted via email or via letter. And then obviously we've been taking notes at tonight's meeting and we have been recording it. So aware of all the comments that we've received this evening. But if anyone has any other questions, feel free to send them through now or raise your hand. Okay, not seeing any, so we'll wrap up. If you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to send me an email, even with questions or any comments you may have. And as Wendy said, I don't know if there's a chat feature since this is a webinar, but the full plan set is available on our website. So if you want to take a look at that, the plans I showed are included in there, obviously. One last question, will this project stress the water and sewer system? So that's part of the analysis, correct, Jennifer?
Yeah, that is a topic that we'll be studying in the EIR.
Yeah, so they work with our Public Works Department to do a sewer analysis and make sure there's capacity for the project at the kind of number of people that are expected. Last comment is, I am grateful for this presentation, but hopefully you will solicit more input from Adobe Wells residents. So I believe Kylie is planning on having more community meetings where we actually talk about the details of the project versus what we're here to talk about this evening. And then any public meetings or public hearings that the city is involved in do have those mailed notices, which may be how you found out about this meeting this evening. And I believe Kylie for their community meetings also does mailed notices, and then we'll also put updates on our website as they become available. Okay, well, we are going to wrap up. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. This was really helpful as we're starting the EIR process. And please feel free to email me if you have questions or if you do want to submit formal comments. The deadline for a formal comment is May 18th. But thank you, everyone.